Good evening. I want to welcome you to our online class, First Steps, Getting Started at Ancestry.com. I'm Jeannie Krausman, and I'll be moderating the event tonight, but Juliana Smith, the editor of our Ancestry Weekly Discovery and our in-house go-to source for everything family history, is actually going to be your instructor. So, Julie, I'm going to turn it over to you right now.
Hi. Thank you very much for everybody for being here. One other thing I wanted to point out too is in the email, the reminder email that you got, there was a link to a PDF form with kind of an outline of our presentation tonight. So if you want, you can go back and review that, print that out later on, and that'll have a lot of the important information that we're going to present tonight. So let's get started. When you're getting started with any project, sometimes that's the hardest part, taking that first step. But once you actually take the plunge and take that first step and overcome the first obstacle, the next steps become a lot clearer. So today, that's what we want to accomplish. We want to walk you through that first step and get you on the way to discovering your ancestors. We're going to talk about where you can find information on your family and how Ancestry.com can help. We'll discuss where to start your search on Ancestry.com because we want to help you make the most of all the tools and the resources that are available to you, the records. Once you've found a record, we're going to take a look at what you can learn from it and how you can use the information in that record as a springboard for your next steps. Your ancestor left clues to your family story in all of the records that they left behind. They're in census records, immigration records, newspaper clippings, church, military, so many places. And our job as the family historian is to piece together these clues and discover our family stories. And that's where the fun begins. So how can Ancestry.com help? Well, in the past, researching your family history meant visiting the places where your ancestors left records or hiring someone to do it for you. A lot of research was done through the mail. You'd write away to a repository and wait weeks or even months for a response. And even when you could visit in person, you were confined to the facility's hours of operation. So in some cases, if there wasn't an index to the records you were working with, just locating one record could require multiple visits. So for the past 14 years, Ancestry.com has been building partnerships with archives and libraries and churches and other organizations, and we're gathering the records that have in the past been scattered in so many different places. We've indexed and digitized more than 6 billion records, and we're continuing to add new records every week. Throughout the years, Ancestry.com members have also been contributing records that they found in their attics and basements and closets, and they're attaching them to more than 20 million trees on our site. And all these wonderful stories that have been passed down through their families are also preserved on their trees. You may find that you share an ancestor with another member, and through the tools you can work together and explore your ancestors and exchange stories and photographs and information and all the details that you've learned about them. So Ancestry brings together all of these resources so that you can easily explore the many records and stories that your ancestors left behind from the comfort of your home and at your convenience. So speaking of records, let's talk a little bit about some of the records you can expect to find on Ancestry.com. I think most of you probably are familiar with census records. These are a really wonderful resource for family historians, and we've been turning to them for decades. Since 1790, the U.S. has gone around and taken a census of the population, wanting to know more about the people. And the most recent census that's available to us is the 1930 census. That's because there's a 72-year privacy restriction on these records. So we can expect the 1940 census to be released to us, to the public, in 2012. But you can learn a lot of interesting details, and we'll talk a lot more about census records in a little bit. Immigration records are a wonderful collection as well. We have a beautiful collection of immigration records, and these are so special because they mark our ancestor coming to America or arriving in this country. And we have a great collection of passenger arrival records. There are border crossings. Some of our ancestors may not have come in through the ports that we expect. They may have come in through Canada or Mexico. One of the more unique collections in this is our U.S. passport collection. So if you have an ancestor who may have traveled, you may find them in that collection. There are even sometimes photographs in there. And military records. Military records have been prized by family historians for many years because of the wonderful details that they can include. Even if your ancestor didn't serve in the military, you may find a military record for them. For example, the World War I draft registrations. And for World War I, more than 24 million men in the U.S. registered for the draft. And this included immigrants, naturalized people who were born here, citizens. So if you have an ancestor who was born between around 1872 and 1900, you're going to want to check this collection, and not even just direct ancestors. So your ancestor, maybe your great-grandmother's brother. You may find a record for them in here. But there's a lot of great detail to be found in them. You can see here, this is Irving Berlin's record, and on line 5, it even gives his town of origin in Russia. Other records that you can find on Ancestry.com include the family trees that we talked about, submitted by other members. Vital records. We have a growing collection of vital records, and these are really helpful because they were created at or near the time of the event, the birth, the marriage, the death. In a lot of cases, you're going to find indexes that are going to help you obtain the original record. In some cases now, you're even finding original vital records online, and that's really helpful. Historical newspapers and family and local histories. These are unique windows into the world of your ancestors, the communities that they lived in. It tells the newspapers tell the story of the things that were going on while your ancestor was living in a particular place, and we have a really pretty good sized collection of newspapers. Local histories as well. Directories and member lists are helpful because they're going to help us fill in those gaps between those 10-year censuses. Court records, there are land records, probate records. We even have a really neat collection of IRS tax assessment records. We don't maybe want to think so highly of taxes ourselves, but when it comes to tax records, you can find some really interesting things. These are Civil War Civil War era records. And there's so much more, but I want to show you how to start exploring these records. So getting started on Ancestry.com, when you first come to Ancestry.com, you're going to see a page something like this. And up in that top right-hand corner, you're going to see where you can log in. Now, if you've registered for Ancestry.com or are a member, this is where you would log in with your your username and your password. If you've created a tree on Ancestry.com, you'll also have that. That helps us know what tree is yours. When you log in, we say, oh, that's you, that's your tree, and we'll pull that tree up for you. If you'd like to explore some of the records that are available on Ancestry.com, we do offer a 14-day free trial, and you can sign up for that as well. Kind of get a taste for some of the wonderful records and resources that are available. And here's where you would start your tree. You could start with yourself. You could start with a parent, a grandparent. And we'll talk a little bit about trees towards the end of the presentation. But I wanted to talk about searching because this is where it's really fun. This is where the thrill of the chase comes in. And sometimes you think you have to know a whole lot of stuff about your ancestor to start searching, but you really don't. Sometimes just a few basic facts about a person. Typically, you want someone who was alive before that 1930 census and living somewhere in the U.S., or if you're from another country, we have other collections from other countries. But knowing a few basic facts is often enough to get you off and running. I put in a search here for my great-grandfather, Raymond Dyer, or Pop Dyer as my mom knew him. He died when she was young, and she knew that he lived in Kings County or Brooklyn, New York, all of his life. So we put in his name, the place that he lived, and she remembered that he died when she was about 10 years old, and that he was somewhere around 80. And we have this little calculate it link here. It's going to help you calculate, in this case, that he was born somewhere around 1871. And it doesn't have to be precise, because just getting us into the ballpark is often enough to get what we need. And in this case, this basic search was very effective. It pulls up an online tree as well as 6 census enumerations. In fact, it gives us every available census from 1870 to 1930 that he was alive for, or that is available to us. Again, we don't have the 1940 available. And as some of you may know, the 1890 census, unfortunately, was largely lost due to a fire in the Commerce Building in Washington, D.C. So only about 6,000 records survived that enumeration. So we have to turn to other sources to kind of fill that gap. But all the censuses that we have available for Brooklyn for that period came up in this search. And Census Records can really fill out what we know about an ancestry. Even if we come in knowing only those few things like we knew about Raymond Dennis or Raymond Dyer, look at what just the 1930 can add to what we know. A street address, names of other family members. Knowing their family structure is so important when you start searching for them, because especially if you're working with a common name, because it can help you identify them in the crowd. The street address can help you locate churches or synagogues or other religious organizations in the area that they may have been a part of. And we could also look for cemeteries in the area, different places in the place where they live that they may have left other records. So those street addresses is very important, pinpointing them in a place and time. Beginning in 1880, the censuses listed relationships to the head of households. Sometimes you may find extended family living with them, the in-laws perhaps. It also tells where they owned or rented a home and the value or rent of that home, which is a really interesting piece of your family history. Ages and birthplace should be leading you to birth records. This is going to help you locate those. Age at first marriage similarly would lead you to marriage records, either civil or religious. Education and literacy. A lot of people kind of gloss over these things, but it kind of puts in context. This is teaching you a little bit more about your ancestor, and it may affect the way they answered some of these questions, in fact. Did they speak English is another important thing. If they didn't speak English and the enumerated didn't speak their native language, then they may have had a hard time communicating. They may have to have a neighbor or someone go interpret for them. And so things can get lost in translation. We know that. So that's a helpful thing to know when you're trying to look at maybe something's a little inaccurate in the census record. Parents' birthplaces can lead you to your immigrant ancestor. And the language spoken in the home country can alert you to their ethnicity. I have some Hungarian ancestors, and wow, there's a lot of Hungarians on the page. It was interesting to note that some of them had Slovak as their native language, where some of them, like my great-grandparents, had Magyar. So this is kind of giving you a little bit of a clue to their ethnic background, and especially in these countries where the borders change so frequently. And immigration data is really important when you're going to look for those arrival records. We talked about the passenger arrival records, border crossings. When we have that actual date of them coming to the country, that's going to help you to narrow your search in those records. Naturalization status is also given, and in fact, if you can find them in 1920, you're even going to get the year of immigration or naturalization as well. Occupation, industry status is not only an interesting thing for you to know, but it's also another identifier that helps you pick your John Smith or James Kelly out from all the other ones. And military service, we talked about how the wonderful details we can find in military records. So I wanted to put together kind of a visual thing to just kind of let you know how much you can build out what you know about an ancestor. Remember, we started with Raymond Dyer, and we started our search with just a name, estimated birth date, and a place that he lived. And from 1930, we can get a little bit more information from the people that were living in his household. And we kind of deduce things, too, because his wife, he was listed as a widower. This is 1920. So if he's a widower by 1920, now we can estimate that she died before then. We had the names of children and family members. Going back to 1910, we see his wife, Marguerite, is living with him. So now we know that she died somewhere between 1910 and 1920. We make these estimates based on all the different years as we pull together all the information that we find. And then in 1900, we began adding even the month for that census year. That for people that were alive then, it added the month that they were born as well. In 1880, now we have to skip that 1890, that big 20-year gap, and we go back to 1880, and now he's living at home, and we've got his parents and siblings. So we've got even more people to research. And beyond that, we also see that there were people that were living next door to them in 1880, and they're listed in the same household in 1870. Well, a little more research on them turns out that that's Marguerite's family. Those are the donors. So you really begin to pull out, look at all of what from just those few facts, you can see how much as we take them back in time year by year. So let's talk a little bit about searching. And we will be having another class towards the end of this month on February 28th that's going to go a little bit more in depth into searching. So if you'd like to learn more about searching after tonight, you can feel free to sign up for that. But here's the main search box that you're going to find on the home page, or if you click on the search tab. And it's where we did our basic search, and there's some interesting things in there, but we can get a little bit more advanced. One thing to remember when you're searching this is that you're searching everything on Ancestry.com. You're searching all the trees. You're searching all 6 billion records. So there's a lot of stuff that goes behind this search, and that's why that sometimes that basic is really helpful, because it kind of cuts through the clutter and gets the things that match the closest. Because they're all all these records are different shapes and sizes, and they include different information. So sometimes your ancestors aren't going to show up in that first batch. So if we click that Show Advanced button in the upper right corner, we're going to get some more options that are going to allow us to fish a little bit deeper and find some of those records that didn't come up in that initial search. And I want you to think about what type of events are going to turn up in records, what type of information they include. For example, a death date is typically only going to show up in a death-related record. So because obviously they didn't know when they were going to die when they were still alive, but most records were created while your ancestor was living. So unless I'm looking for a death record, I typically won't include that information, because what happens is Ancestry is going to take all the pieces that you've put in that search form that match, and then it's going to say, oh, death date, well, that doesn't match because there's no death date. So it might take off like a half a point, and you run the risk of maybe nudging a record that might be relevant to you down. So if you think about what types of things you're typically going to find, a location, age is often found in records. So a lot of times that's why that birth date is such a powerful thing. Their name, of course. Other places they may have lived. You may want to add some other places. But you may want to think twice before you enter that death date, unless you're going to look for a death record, which of course you are going to want to do at some point. But the other thing is too is if you we also have the option on this advanced form to specify exact. You could actually even rule out a record by specifying exact and the death date, even though it is your ancestor's death date. Because it's not in that record, you could be ruling it out. So it's kind of good to let those fuzzy searches. And there are different events that you can add here. You can add in, in addition to a birth or death, where they lived again. You could add in a marriage for records that include a marriage date, arrival, departure for those immigration records. And also military service is going to help you narrow down bring up any military records to the surface. And we also give the ability to use date ranges. This is really helpful. We talked about things matching and not matching and how we kind of estimated some dates. Well, we can widen that window that means that it still counts as a match, even if it's off by a couple years, by adding plus or minus either 1, 2, 5, or even 10 years. 10 years in either direction is actually giving you a 20-year window, which may seem like a lot of time, but when you think of it in the context of the centuries of records that we have, it's really kind of narrowing your search, and it's going to say that anything that falls in this 20-year window is a match, so it's going to help bring those relevant records up. So even if you don't know when your ancestors were born, estimate based on the age of their children. You can have a pretty wide window that still counts it as a match, and it helps nudge those positive records, those good matches, up to the top. Also, adding family members. Family structure is really helpful. There was one case where my uncle had called. He was trying to research his family history, and he could not find his brother. His brother was alive in 1930. He knew they were living in Canton, Ohio. Couldn't find the records for anything. So what I did was I went in, and instead of, sometimes we get hung up on the surname, and that seems to be one of the parts of the records that can get mangled the worst. So instead of getting hung up on the surname, I put in his brother's name, and then I added both parents, his mother's name, just the given name, and father's name, just the given name. Put in the location of Canton, Ohio, and the record popped up to the top because the family structure was there. And you can add other relatives if you knew they were living in the house, but always make the one caveat with that is that's only going to show up in the records or census records from 1880 forward, because those are the only records where a relationship was stated. And there are other details, even specifying a gender or something like that can be helpful in narrowing it down. One thing I would warn, though, is don't overdo it. Remember we talked about each piece matching, and the ones that don't match can kind of push things down. What I like to do is rotate different pieces of information in and out and just play around with it. That's really the great thing about these searches and what makes it so fun. You really can't break it. The worst thing, you find something unexpected. But or if you don't find anything, you try over and start a new one. But you just keep trying, and a lot of times you're going to come up with some really great things. Another option that's available on the advanced search is a collection priority. If you have ancestors from Canada and you're tired of waiting through all of the U.S. records when you're looking for your Canadian ancestors, you can say, you know what, let's focus on the Canadian collections here. And similarly, you can focus on the types of records you're looking for. If you only want to search on trees, you could deselect everything except trees. Or maybe you are only interested in the historical records or photographs. You can choose what types of records you want to select. But the one thing with these two options that you need to keep in mind is that these preferences are sticky. And what I mean by sticky is that when you leave the site and you come back, it's going to keep these settings. So if you decide you want to research the U.S. side of your family the next week, you're going to want to go in and readjust those settings so that they reflect the correct collections that you want to be searching. And there are different ways to look at the records. When we looked at Raymond's records, we were looking at the records as some are sorted by relevance. Okay, so what that means is we were bringing the best possible matches up from the top from all of the collections on Ancestry.com. So you're going to find a mix of census records, Social Security Death Index, vital records. The ones that match the best are the ones that are going to be pushed towards those front pages. Now, you could also get an overview of some of the other collections that you're getting some close matches. They may not all be exact matches, and you may not find your ancestor in every single one of these, but it's a great way to kind of get a view of all the different collections that we have, and sometimes it gives me ideas. That's why I like looking at this one of, oh, this is a database I want to search a little closer. And these are summarized by category. And then you'll see each of the databases listed below the categories. So this is another interesting way to go too. Kind of look around and see what types of things are out there. You may not find your ancestor right off in this first batch of hits. There may be some close or fuzzy matches. But maybe your ancestor's lurking in there and you just need to tweak that search a little better. And sometimes getting a little closer to the data is helpful. In fact, we can actually search each category individually. And this is really helpful for a couple of reasons because, first of all, you're ruling out a lot of the collections maybe that you're not focused on. So you're more focused on a smaller collection. And also the search forms are going to be more tailored. And now you can access the categories either by just clicking through to the search tab. It'll list all of the categories. And also some of our more popular are available. Just hover over that search tab and you'll see that drop-down menu. And you could choose the collection that you want to search. And here's an example of what I was talking about with the customized fields. This is the immigration search form. And you can see we talked about that arrival date that we can find in the 1900, the 1910, the 1920, and the 1930 census. All four of those enumerations include an arrival date for immigrants. So if you have found an immigrant in one of those four censuses, you can go plug that arrival date in here, and that's going to help you narrow your search. If you don't know I would sometimes, if you don't find them right off, even using that date, give them a little wiggle room. Because remember, sometimes if the record was created like 50 years after, I have one ancestor who was off like a couple years. He was off 2 years, but the record was created 50 years after he immigrated. So it's kind of understandable. The years get a little fuzzy over time. Also, you're going to be able to focus your search if you search the database collection directly. Say you were missing your ancestor in the 1900 census, for example. When you go through to the 1900 census and search it directly, excluding all the other censuses that are out there, you're going to be able to use the information that was actually included. Each census included varying amounts of detail. The most recent censuses are, of course, the most detailed, but they're all different, and each search form for each census year is going to be just a little bit different, kind of tweaked to match the information that's there. For example, in the 1900 census, it listed a marriage year. So you can find that marriage year is searchable. The migration year is searchable because it has that date in there as well. You could add family members that were living in the house at the same time and help maybe bring that match up to the top because those relationships were stated that year. And even adding that relationship to the head of household. If you have John Smith, who was the son of the head of household that you're looking for, that's going to help you eliminate all the John Smiths who were the head of the household or perhaps a father-in-law or someone else. Also marital status, even something as simple as marital status. Were they single or married at that point in time? And parents' birthplaces. If you know where the parent, maybe from the 1910 census, you know where the parents' birthplaces are, you could add that, and that's going to narrow your search down a bit too. So how do you find other collections beyond the census? We know we have all the census records on Ancestry.com and a lot of the passenger arrivals, but getting to know what records are available for the places where your ancestor lived is really important because there are a lot of really neat collections for different locations and just the different categories even. Exploring the category level is interesting. But to find an individual collections, you would turn to the card catalog. And we call it the card catalog because it's very similar. It's not really a drawer where you're going to pull out the cards, but it's similar to the catalogs that you would find in a library, where this is the index to all the books in our library, or in this case, the database titles. So you want to look for different collections there. And you can access them by hovering over that search tab again, and then that last option is the card catalog. And there are a couple different ways you can use that. You can search the catalog. You can see in the upper left corner there's a box for searching. Now when you search the title, what you're searching for is words that are in the title of that database. You see the list of databases here. I've entered Vermont here. And the only titles that are coming up are titles with the word Vermont in it. Now, you could also search the descriptive materials, and if you took that out of the title and instead search the keyword, that's going to search the descriptions as well. So, for example, using this Vermont, perhaps there's a database, and I believe there is, of New England marriages that includes records from Vermont. Vermont's not in the title, although you would definitely be interested in looking at that collection. So sometimes you're going to get a wider results when you use it in the keyword field. And in addition to, sometimes I think the more powerful way to use the card catalog is by filtering. There are a lot of filters below that search box, and a lot of times I'll just leave those search terms blank. You can search by record type. Vital records, census records, immigration. You can search by location. If you were looking to see what immigration records are available for the U.S. or perhaps for the UK or Canada, you can narrow by location. You can go down even not just to the state level if you're looking for, say, vital records. You can even go down to a county level. And this is a great way to find some more localized collections that don't always pop up to the top because they're not as commonly used and they may not have as many fields indexed as the census records and the larger collections. You can even locate or narrow it down by time frame, either the century or the decade in which the records are available. So these are really helpful in exploring, and really go out and look around and see. When you go to the library to see what's available on a topic, your first stop is going to be that card catalog. So knowing what's out there is going to really help you explore and make the most of the many thousands. There are more than 30,000 titles on Ancestry.com right now. Another way to explore the collections by location are these, we have state pages. Actually, they're location pages. You can see up on the top above the U.S. map, there are also different countries in Europe, Canada, Australia. You can go through and explore what we have for other countries as well. But going through and looking for U.S. resources by state is going to help you narrow your search and be able to see some of the really popular collections by state. So when you click on a state, you're going to be taken to a page like this one. And then you can go click through and view even more. But a lot of the most popular ones are going to be listed on this page, and it's a really great way to explore the records that are available. And this is really helpful, especially if you're looking for like local histories and you want to look for some really more unique and obscure records. The great way to find them is through these state pages. So let's talk about the records. When you first find a record, so you're going to either find an index or you're going to find, sometimes, in a lot of cases, a growing number of cases, you're going to be finding the actual record. But the first page you're going to take to after you have made a successful search is this record page. And this is great because it kind of lays out in a nutshell and allows you to see a lot of the pertinent facts and hopefully identify whether or not this is your ancestor. But this shouldn't be your last stop. See, whenever you see that orange link there that says View Original Document, you want to click through to see the actual record of your ancestors. And for example, this is an 1870 census record for one of my ancestors. His name was actually Thomas Howley, but the enumerator wrote it as Thomas Holy. I don't know if that indicated how pious he was or not, but his name was misspelled. So I've gone in and added a correction here, and you can see that little red box on the right. If somebody's added a correction, if you find your ancestor, you want to look over here on the side at that Member Connect tab, because you may find that someone's added a comment or a correction or additional information about that record. In addition to that, because I've added a correction, you can see at the bottom of the page, I've corrected the spelling of his name. And just by doing that, that's why the link to my profile is here. And somebody else who interacted with this record could click through to my profile and contact me through our messaging service. In addition to that, you're also going to see other records that I've attached to Thomas Howley. So for example, if you did a search if he was your ancestor and you found him in 1870, wouldn't you be interested to know where he was in 1880 or in 1860? And if I've attached those other records to my Thomas Howley, we're going to present those records to you so that you can see whether or not they're the same person too. And that's going to help you save a little bit of a step. It's kind of a way of us all working together to find our ancestors. Here's how you would update. This is a little window to how you would update the name for someone if you found an incorrect name on an ancestor. All you have to do is click that Add Update link in the lower left corner, and this box is going to pop up. And you just pick out the reasons why you put in the correct name. You can even add a comment of why you believe that to be true. And it's a great way of kind of leaving a little breadcrumb trail for other people to follow. And there are a lot of other things you can do with the image as well. You can, this little screen right here is kind of small, so you're only seeing a small portion of the census image. Now you could move around by just clicking on that image and dragging it around left and right or up and down to see more of the image. But you can see a lot more by clicking that box that says View Image Only. That's going to take away that side panel and that lower panel, and you'll see more of the image there. But I always encourage people to click back to that every so often when you find a new record, because that again is sticky, where when you leave it at the View Image Only, your next record you view is you're only going to see that. But I always try to make a mental note to go check and see if anyone else has interacted with that record, with that side panel. Also, we talked about all the wonderful details you can find in these records. A lot of people, we get in this age where it's so easy to just click and add it to a tree, which is fantastic. It's wonderful. It saves all the source information and all the details, so we can easily come find the record again. But I like to print out a copy of it so that I can go through and really look at it. And in fact, I keep a notebook of all the images of the records for my ancestors, and I like to go through and when I really want to brainstorm, just kind of page through the records and look at the clues that are in them. So these are the options that are available for printing. You can print just the image and then just write in your source information on it. Or if you want, click on that second option and it's going to print out the source information, the index, everything about that record so you can easily find it again, as well as the image itself. I always click that box in the middle to print them on separate pages, and then I just put them back to back in my binder. And that makes the image a little bit more easier to read. Otherwise, you're going to get kind of a smaller image at the bottom of one page. But we also offer a customized print, and this is really fun. These are done through mycanvas.com. It's Ancestry.com's publishing service. And you can print just like an individual record. And you can go through, and what I've done here is duplicate the image and kind of called out my ancestor's name. And I added a picture to it, and there's different kind of little embellishments like the leaf that I can add. It's automatically going to give you that index information. The source information is listed below the image there. So all your pertinent information is on that image. And what we did this year, my dad and I got together, and we actually made a few of these customized prints and sent them off to family members for Christmas. And again, that's through that customized link, at the customized print at the bottom of those selections. And also, one of the best parts about finding these wonderful things is being able to share it with your family. And we've tried to make that really easy for you. You can share your finds through Facebook or Twitter, where you're going to reach out to family, friends, and let everyone know the exciting find. And they'll actually be able to click through and see the image that you found of the record that you found when they're available. And you can also share them through email. And this is even if an ancestor or if your family member isn't a member of Ancestry.com, they'll still be able to click through and see that record that you found. And for the email, I believe it's like 30 days. They'll be able to view it through that link in there. So that's really helpful, and that's a great way to get your family excited about family history and interested, and maybe it may spark some memories that they may want to share something back with you. And of course, you want to save that record so you can find it again. We talked about attaching the record to someone in your tree. If you've already started a tree, you'll have that option available. We also have what's called the Shoebox. You could save it to your Shoebox. And the Shoebox is kind of a little catch-all bin, and you can just put the records in there. I found this is a great one. It's dinner time, and of course it's right after I've made a find, and I don't have time to really enjoy the record. So sometimes I'll stash it in my Shoebox, and then I'll come back later on when I get a few minutes and pull it up and print it out and do all the things, attach it to my tree and make some notes and things like that. Also, you can save the image to your computer, to your hard drive. So that's helpful as well. And here's a view of your Shoebox. This is what it looks like. To access the image, you're just going to click on that link there. And if you have a very cluttered Shoebox like I do, you'll see at the bottom right corner, you'll see all Shoebox items. And you can click through there to see everything in your Shoebox. And when you click through there, if there's an item, maybe you discovered that this one record you thought might be your ancestor isn't really, from that page you'll be able to delete the items, or if you want to click on the item, open it up again, and then you can add it to your tree if you found out it was. And when you go to save the records to your tree, that's pretty simple as well. This is the box on the bottom of the page is what you're going to save the person in your tree. You can just start typing, and you'll see a drop-down menu of list of people that match what you're typing, and you can select from that list. If you have more than one tree, you can choose a different tree. Sometimes you find records for someone new in your family, and you could add this as a new person with that link in the bottom right of that box. But it's really simple to just add people to your tree. Again, though, make sure you take the time to print out those records and grab those clues from it, because those are your next steps. So let's talk a little bit more about trees. You can start your tree by entering information manually, or you can upload a GEDCOM. If you've already started a family tree in some family history software, a GEDCOM file is kind of a universal language that all of the genealogy programs are going to state. It's kind of a common language that they all speak, so that we can share information between the different platforms, between your online tree and between Family Tree Maker. If you do use Family Tree Maker, you can upload files directly without even using the GEDCOM, and there are a couple other trees that you can use that same functionality where you can load them directly and not have to export a GEDCOM file. If you don't use different software besides some of the ones that support that, just go to your help files and look up export GEDCOM file, and it should be pretty straightforward how to do it. And then you're going to just upload that file into your tree. And there is a class out there on online trees that you could view as well. And we had one, I believe in September, there was one on Family Tree Maker 2011. Those are all in those webinar archives. If you hover over the Learning Center, you'll see a link to webinar archives, and you can go through there. There are a lot of other classes that are going to go into some of these subjects in more detail. Going into your family tree, once you've loaded it on Ancestry.com, this is the default view that you're going to see when you first come into your tree, and that's the family file. And this is going to show you everyone in your family, not just your direct ancestors, but their siblings. And so it's kind of a big tree, and you can move it around just like you did with the census image. Just kind of left click on it and then move it whichever direction you want to go. And that little left bar on the left, or the little bar on the left that I've called out in the red box, you can actually shrink the tree, make the icon smaller if you want to see more of the structure, or maybe zoom in on a particular branch. There's also a print option that you could use to print that. And this is perhaps, if you click over up in that upper left corner, you'll see the box with the pedigree. You could click over, and now you're looking at the pedigree view. And that's going to the more traditional thing that you may have been used to seeing. And that's just going to show your direct ancestors, the people that you're directly descended from. It won't show the siblings or anything. But you can get a closer view on your ancestor by hovering over their name, and then you're going to see this little box pop up. And this is going to let you either go in and do a quick edit, or you can search for someone for them. You can access hints, which we'll talk about in a minute, or view their profile is the first option right below the picture of Muriel there. And when you view their profile, you're going to see a much more detailed page. All of the records that you've added to them are going to be found on this page, and it actually pulls the information from the records as well. If you find a census record, it's going to pull that birth date and bring in all the information and kind of pull it all together for you so you can really use this as a tool. You can see up at the top of the page you've got the basic information, and you can go in and edit and add more information that you've learned about your ancestor, perhaps beyond Ancestry.com. There are also some other options, including add a note, or I can't read the other ones, but you could also, I know one of them is finding famous relatives, and you could create a military page. That's what the one I couldn't read was. But the notes section is really helpful because a lot of times there's little facts or different stories that don't quite fit into the little neat little boxes. So I like to keep them in my notes section there. That's why I called that out. You can also go through and search. There's a lot of other options that are available in those boxes below. And you can also add media to it. You can add photographs to each person in your tree. So every picture I have of Madeline or of Muriel, I can add in here. The records, as I mentioned below that, there's a timeline. This is where it's pulling out all the events that it found in records that we've attached to our tree. And it kind of pulls them out and makes a kind of a chronology. So now we're kind of tracing Muriel through time. Over on the right side of the page, you have links to other family members, and you can navigate to parents, siblings, children through this page as well. And, of course, there's Member Connect. We can go through this. You can see here that through my tree, it's found that there may be 4 possible connections who are also researching Muriel Dyer. So going through and looking through the member connections, excuse me, I can go through and see if I can find other members who are researching her and exchange information. And when I connect with these other members, when I go through, if you go to the Collaborate tab, underneath there's a link for recent Member Connect activity, and I'll be able to follow the different things that they're finding on Muriel through that page. And hints. I showed you briefly touched on the hints. These are those little green leaves that you see on some of the people in the trees. What this is Ancestry.com is working behind the scenes. As you're entering information in your tree, it's going behind and taking that information and searching its collections for you as well. And it's going to try and find records that match what you're adding. And sometimes they'll come up with some really interesting research that maybe we didn't come up with in our searches. And when you go through and you click through to see their hints, for example, these are the hints that I have for Clarence Dyer, my ancestor's sibling. And you can see there's quite a few records here, and I can go through and view the hints and decide whether this is really Clarence, the Clarence that's in my family tree, or maybe it's just a close match. And if I want, then I can go through and either attach them or say ignore the hint if it's not one that's relevant to my family. So this is another way where Ancestry is trying to help you save some time and again, make sure you go through and view that record, and when you find something, extract every clue you can, because your next steps are going to be lying in those records. So everybody's search is going to be a little different, but we're all going to start with that first step, and I hope that I've been able to give you some ideas for where to start and how to continue your search on Ancestry.com once you've taken that first step. So I think we still have few minutes, about 12 minutes for
Julie,
Q&A.
we do have a few minutes left. Thank you so much. That was all wonderful information. And what I'd like to remind everybody right now is if you have any questions for Julie, please go ahead and submit them. Before we have Julie start answering some questions, I do want to also mention, as Julie's mentioned a few times during the class, that there are 2 more classes in our First Steps series. First Steps number 2, which is tips for making successful searches, and First Steps number 3, what now? How to use your discoveries to make your next big find. You'll be able to find both of these classes in the Ancestry.com Learning Center. Just hover over the Learning Center tab at Ancestry.com and select Webinar Archives to sign up and learn more. You'll also find a whole bunch of other classes in there, everything from finding your female ancestors to immigration and emigration records, as well as looking at common surnames and family tree maker and just about every topic you can possibly imagine in there. Now, one last thing that I want to remind you of is please stick around to the end of our class to take our brief survey. We like to get your responses to our survey so that we can make all of our classes the most effective as possible, and so that we ensure that we're making new classes to give you the exact kind of instruction that you need and want. Now, right now, I've got a couple of questions that have come in for Julie, so let's just go ahead, or Juliana, let's just go ahead and dive right on in.
Okay.
The first one I want to give you, Julie, is there an advantage to building a tree from personal information, or should I just let Ancestry.com do it? What are the advantages and disadvantages to each?
Oh, building your own tree from personal and versus letting Ancestry.com build your tree for you?
Yes.
Well, Ancestry, you can go in and tap into some of the resources that are out there, some of the other trees that are out there. Well, first of all, building your own tree is way more fun, in my opinion, because you're really learning more about your family. It's easy to, tap into a tree and, see all the names and the dates, but when you look at the records that you find, and as you're searching for all these records, and even if you find a tree and as you're going through and verifying the information that you found in that tree, you're going to find the stories of your ancestors in those records, and that's what really is exciting and fun, and that's where you really start learning about your family. They're real people then, not just a name and a date on a tree. So that, to me, is the biggest advantage to building your own tree. Quality control would be the other big perk, because you know your family, and you can go through and determine, okay, is this really my ancestor? And you can go back to family members, hopefully, and maybe try and see if this agrees with what your other families know to be true. So those are really big benefits.
Okay. Now, you also, Julie, mentioned that the 1890 census was destroyed by fire, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
What records, could you go over really quickly, what records are best to use in place of the 1890 census?
Yeah, that fire was really a tragic loss, and in fact, it wasn't even the fire; it was the water damage, of all things, that destroyed them. But what we do is at Ancestry.com, we've gathered a lot of city directories, voter lists. We've got some voter registrations from the 1890s for Chicago that are fantastic. But we've gathered them all together, and we've created what's called the 1890 Census Substitute. And while it's really no substitute for the real thing, nothing could replace that tragic loss. It is going to help you place your ancestors in a particular place and learn some things about them. If you go to the card catalog, I would enter 1890 Census in the title field, and you're going to be able to pull up that census substitute.
Okay, that's wonderful. And by the way, I just want to throw in my own success here. I found an 1895 city directory that had one of my ancestors in it, and I was thrilled because I could never figure out what happened to that family during the 1890s. So there are a lot of fantastic records out there that will help you with that. Okay, here's one for you. And Julia, I know this is after your own heart because you have Irish ancestry. So I have an ancestor who came from Ireland in 1920, so she missed that census. But I have found her in 1930. How can I find her between those years, between 1920 and 1930?
Again, city directories are a great resource. As with the 1890 Census Substitute, we do have a large collection of city directories from other years. If you go to there's one collection called U.S. City Directories. That's the main title of it. If you go to that collection, and you can either navigate that through the search tab, go to directories, it's one of the top ones that's going to pop up, or just put in U.S. City Directories and you should be able to find it if you search the title field. But that collection includes directories from different years and different places. What you're going to want to do once you get into that collection is go through the browse function. You can go through and search the whole collection, but remember you're searching directories from all over the country. What I like to do is go in, and on the browse function that's in the upper right corner, I'll select the state and the city where I think my ancestor was at that point in time, and see what years are available, see if there are even any records from the 1920s for that location. That would be one good resource for that. Also, creating a chronology. If you have any other family members, researching wide, if siblings came over with her, where were they born? Were they born here in the U.S. or were they born somewhere else? That's going to help you. If you can pinpoint the arrival record, especially if they came in 1920, that passenger arrival record is going to have some really great details on it. But yeah, city directories, look again through those state pages. If you know where they lived, see what other resources, because there are unique record collections for different places in the country, and you're going to be able to explore those records and maybe find her and kind of piece together where she was during that 10-year span.
Now, Julie, to build on that a little bit, what happens if you have relatives who lived in rural areas where there weren't city directories? Is it going to be more difficult to find records on, let's say, your farming ancestors?
Yeah, it can be, only because a lot of the rural records haven't been there isn't as much attention on them. But there are also some benefits too. There's not as many people to wade through when you do find the collections. And there are, as far as directories go, there are a lot of county directories. Look around for the county that they lived in and see if you can find county directories. Also, you may want to go offline or go off Ancestry.com and look for local genealogical societies in the area. Look for websites that document resource for that county, because a lot of times you're going to find the records held on the county level. So look and see what type of genealogy for Will County, Illinois, or whatever the rural county is, and see what kind of resources pop up. And again, go through those state pages and navigate down to the county level, and you're going to be able to see some county-specific levels. And you're actually we have some societies that have contributed some fantastic resources to Ancestry.com, as well as records that are being indexed through our World Archives project. So you may find more than you think for those rural ancestors. So check out the card catalog, check out those state pages, and whittle it down to the county level.
Okay, I want to ask get a couple of questions in here about family trees. One of the first ones is, if I create a family tree in Ancestry.com, am I going to be able to control who can view it?
Yes, you can. You can make your tree private if you want, and only people who you give permission to view your tree will be able to view it. They would have to contact you through our messaging system. Or you could go out and invite people. You could make your tree private and say, you know what, I just want to work with my mom or my sister on this tree, and these are the only people. So you can actually go in and invite them invite other family members to your tree. You can even give them, once you invite people to your tree, you can give them varying levels of access to your tree. Maybe they can only view your tree. Or maybe you'd like to work with them and allow them to be able to add things but maybe not take things off. Or you can make them an editor and allow them all the same privileges that you have to add or remove things that you feel don't apply to your tree anymore.
Now, Julie, we just have time for one or two more questions, so I want to ask one more question about family trees. And that's if I run across someone's family tree that has more complete profiles or just more documents than I have attached to it, should I just copy those into my tree, or what would you recommend?
I always recommend to ask and reach out to people. Yes, most family historians are very generous, and they're more than happy to collaborate with you, but it's always nice to be asked. So I always try to ask people before I, take any information. And of course, if I'm going to get information from them, I should be crediting them with the information as well. And we also have to, just be respectful of others, and just taking whole branches of people's trees, it can be frowned on because people have worked hard. And if they are gracious enough to offer you something when you make a find, what I try to do is keep a list of the contacts of people that have, are related to me in different branches of my tree. And whenever I make a find, even if they can find me through Member Connect, I try to shoot them a note. Plus, it's just fun to be able to share your finds with them as well. It's kind of just a give and take, the golden rule thing.
Well, and there's an added bonus, too. You might have even found a new cousin.
Yes.
Well, or, a distant cousin.
The other benefit of contacting them and reaching out is that they may have things that are not on that tree and that they may be willing to share with you as well. So it's always good to start off on a good foot,
And then, Julie, I want to go with one last question. This is about searching. You had mentioned previously that collection preferences, some of the search preferences are sticky. Can you go over one more time exactly what that means?
Sticky means that when you leave Ancestry.com and you come back to the site, this would mainly refer to the collections, like if you wanted to only search Canadian collections or if you only wanted to search UK collections. You can choose to only search those collections through our advanced search template, but if you leave the site and come back, it's still going to be having those settings are going to stay there. So when you come back to the site and start searching for your U.S. ancestors, you're going to be seeing a lot of Canadian records or UK or whatever you've specified there. So it's a great way of, if you've got different branches of the family in different parts of the world that you want to focus on, but you just have to remember when you come back to switch those settings. And usually it's pretty evident because when you are searching and you don't see a census record come up for the U.S., but you see all these UK records, it's kind of going to trigger in your mind that maybe that's why. Also, if you only are searching historical records, if you don't want to search trees and things like that, you may want to go back and I try to remember to just reset everything when I get done searching.
Thank you again for coming, Julie. Thank you, and
Thank you,
we hope you attend again.
Thank you, everyone.